Hello, my name's Mark Helm, and I'm the author of Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage, and I'm the creator of the Self-Storage Quick Start Academy. And I support people who are getting in the self-storage business, and I support the small investor who wants to grow their self-storage business, do so in a strategic way that creates true wealth and a fulfilling career in this fantastic industry. And this happens to be the 100th episode. In other words, the 100th blog, 100 weeks. I have been producing this content, sharing out loud what I'm learning and what I'm thinking about being in this industry. And what I'd like to say is thank you. Without you guys, without you watching or without you reading, I wouldn't be able to do this. And of all the things I do in a day's time, this is perhaps one of the more fulfilling things I do. I'm growing my own self-storage business, but it really is fulfilling to support other smaller investors like ourselves in our company grow in this fantastic business. I know what a difference it's made in my life and what a difference it can make in your life. And on this 100th episode, we happen to be in episode 2 of the complete guide to creating your self-storage business strategy. And what we learned in episode 1 was that to succeed at any vision or to succeed at any goal, according to Tony Robbins, who's a master at goal achievement and fulfilling on visions, there are 3 things that are required. And they're in this importance of order. 1, state, your mental state. 2, stories, the stories you tell yourself. And 3, strategy, the strategy you use to succeed and win at your goal or the game you're playing in life. We happen to be playing a self-storage game. However, this applies to anything in your life. Now what happens is, as human beings, we go straight to number 3, strategy. You know, I'm guilty of that as a teacher. It's very easy to do, and I know that's what the people I'm working with, what they think they want. As a student, it's easy to go straight to number 3. Why? Well, because it satisfies the mind and it gives us something to, quote, work on. And usually we're executing a strategy and we're not really changing anything about ourselves. So again, in the order is mental state, then the mental stories, then the strategy. So let's tackle the big one first, mental state. So last week I asked you to answer a couple questions. Do you remember? If not, or if you didn't watch last week, stop here, click below, or go to creatingwealththroughselfstorage.com and watch episode 99. Then come back to this episode. We're going to address those questions in a few minutes, but let's talk about and define what we mean when we say mental state. We say it's the most important of the 3. Why? Well, because the environment in which something exists defines the potential that's possible. Now let me say that again. The environment in which anything exists, the environment itself defines what's possible. So in other words, the vision, the goal, the dream you have for your self-storage business, the environment itself, the mental state in which that vision lives, the mental state defines what's possible. It's critical. When I'm working with people, I spend as much or more time on the mental state and the stories as I do the actual strategy. That's pretty theoretical. Let's talk about what does that mean? Well, let's take an extreme example here. I want you to imagine an extremely negative person. Extremely negative. Always seeing what's wrong with other people. Always seeing what's wrong with the situation. Always seeing the problem. You know that person. Extremely negative. They walk into a room, the energy of that room automatically goes down. Now, what do you think the chances are of that person fulfilling the vision of a 10 or 15 facility storage business? What do you think the odds are for that person? Not very good, right? Why? Well, to achieve that many facilities, one has to be able to assemble a team, to motivate a team, to trust the team members, to be able to empower the team members. One needs to be able to empower and inspire probably partners, lenders, employees, customers. And what do you think the chances of an extremely negative, pessimistic person being able to do that? Not very good. The mental state of that person defines what's possible no matter what strategy that person has. Now, let's take another extreme example. Let's go the complete other way. I want you to imagine a person that's very upbeat, very positive, always sees the best in people and always sees the best in situations. People, employees, customers, everybody likes to be around that person because of who they get to be when they're in the presence of that person. Now, do you think that person's going to fulfill on their vision? Odds are yes. Why? Because the mental state in which that vision exists is a match for the vision itself. Now, most of us fall somewhere in the middle. And I don't want to imply that a mental state is just how positive you are. I just use that as an example. But I want you to begin to dwell in, to begin to see that the mental state is critical. The mental state in which you operate, the mental state in which your vision in your business exists, because it all starts in your head first, in the mind, and then it gets out pictured in reality. All of that can only exist and can only be outpictured to the extent that your mental state allows it to. Now, most of us never really consider or think about the mental state in which we operate. We've never been taught to. It's not talked about much. And to use a well-worn analogy, it's the mental state is like the water we swim in. We actually are not even present to it. It's so encompasses us that we don't even see it. Everything we see, say, think, do is filtered through that mental state, and we just don't even see it. The highest possibility for ourselves in our life is determined by the mental state in which we operate most of the time. Let me give you some more examples. Imagine a world where 10 is the highest number. 10 is as big as it gets. Well, a person in that world would not even see 100. Couldn't conceive of 1,000. 1,000,000 is meaningless. Why? Because 10 is as high as it gets. Imagine a world or a context in which you can only see blue and green. You know, yellow is a possibility in that world. Orange wouldn't even show up. You wouldn't even see it. It's not even a possibility in that world of blue-green. So how do we affect our mental state? How do we know what our mental state is? Well, first we have to look. And this is extremely hard for a person to do. We have to really look and assess what is our mental state. Now, this is hard for people, and I'll tell you why. People tend to be very significant and add a lot of meaning to their lives and everything, especially when it's about you or about us. That's not personal to you. That's a conversation we're all born into. We tend to be very significant, especially about ourselves. And if anything begins to show up negative or not real positive about ourselves, we either don't see it, can't be with it, or we have an excuse why. It's so-and-so, it's the economy, it's my parents, it's my whatever. We tend to blame or not even to see it and not even have the ability to be with it. Why? Because that's just what people do. Again, not personal to you. That's just what people do. That's what the people who trained you in life do. We all do it, and we've seen it done, and that's just how we're wired as people. Now, the first step is to begin to see what your mental state is. And how do you do that? Well, you look at your life. Look at what's in your life. What's in your life will point to and tell you what your mental state is. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is to look at that. And if you remember the first question in item number 2 at the end of last week's series is, what is your mental state, especially during the business hours? What is the normal default mental state in which you operate? And to see your mental state, look at what's in your life. Is there abundance or is there scarcity? Is business hard? Or is it easy, fun, and fulfilling? Is life hard, or does life flow? Do your relationships work, or do you tend to be all jammed up in them? Is money flowing, or is it blocked up, trickling? All of these begin to point to the mental state in which you operate most of the time, your default mental state. Now, the art of this, the trick of this, is to look at it and not label it good, bad, right, wrong, because it really isn't. It just is. Whatever your mental state is, your mental state is. The truth is you created it, and once you begin to see it, you can create anything. And what is your current mental state, or what has been your past mental state, has nothing to do with what's going to happen in the future. Why? Because we're beginning to take responsibility for and create a mental state that would be a match for the business or what we're up to in life with our self-storage business. So I know the tendency is to either hammer yourself or come up with excuses. My request is just be with whatever is, whatever you see, and don't run from it. Don't hide from it. Just be with it. Don't make it rosier than it is. Just look at what's in your life. That will inform you or begin to inform you what your mental state is. So now, honestly, what is your mental state? Write it down. Write down whatever you're present to at this moment. It will still continue to unfold, but write down not what you want it to be, but honestly, what is your mental state? A lot begins to happen when you tell the truth and write it down. Do you remember question number 2? Can we affect our mental state? Can we change our mental state? Well, I say yes. I say yes, you can change your mental state. I say yes, you can create whatever mental state you want that's a match for your business. And I'll go so far as to say you can change your mental state in an instant. Now, you've got to be able to see the mental state, be present to it, but I'm going to assert, yes, you can change it. How did you answer that question? I'm not an expert, and I'm not smart enough to tell you the way. In fact, I don't even think there is a way. I think there are a lot of ways. And what I'd like to do is to begin to share with you what I've learned about how to change and take 100% responsibility for your mental state. First of all, what I began to see is that the people who I admired, the people who I would want to mentor me, the people who I wanted to learn from, the people who fulfill on their goals and visions, the first thing I noticed was they all had a very powerful morning routine. Even if they, quote, were not morning people. By the way, there was no such thing as a morning person. If you relate to yourself as someone who's not a morning person, all that is a habit of sleeping late, and you develop that habit, and you can develop any habit you want. If there's a strong enough reason to get up, you'll do it. And I also assert that if you get up earlier every day for a month, you will no longer have the story, or in other words, you will have interrupted the story called I'm not a morning person. What I noticed was these people all had a very powerful morning routine. They got up before anyone else in their household. They created private time. They all had a different routine, but it all was very meaningful to them. And they got centered on what was important to them. Now, this is a time before you look at any screens, before you watch any TV, before you even connect with another human being. You get up, private time. If you're a religious or spiritual person, you connect with what's important to you religiously or spiritually. You use this time to connect with your true north, like the principles, the guiding principles of your life, what's very important to you. And then you begin to create your day, your week, your month from that space. And what I saw was that people who did that began to have real power over how they thought, what they did, and the outcomes that they had. Now, I'll share with you another, and I'm not trying to sell this to you, but another practice that perhaps has made more difference in my business life, in my personal life, than any other practice I have, and that's meditation. I started meditating early in my late 20s, and at that time it was considered strange and weird, and I had to pretty much keep it under wraps. Today, I'm amazed at the number of young business people in their 20s and 30s, millennials, that meditate and talk about how that improves what goes on in their business. But I will say that meditation is a very subtle experience, but it doesn't take long for you to begin to see the effects of a meditation practice. It's hard to kind of quantify and put into words, but a meditation practice gives you a lot of space. You become less reactive in life. Anytime something happens in life, something happens, and then as a human, we have an immediate response. Well, it used to be whatever that immediate response was, I had to ride that wherever it took me. With a meditation practice, you begin to observe your thinking, and you begin to have space. Something will happen, you'll still have an immediate response, but there's a space there. There is an opportunity to observe it as, oh, that's just my reaction to it, and it just ends up being how you're reacting at the moment. It's just the thought you had at that moment. Now, does that thought serve me, or does it not serve me? And it's hard to put into words, but what I've noticed is my mind's quieter, I have a lot more space, and life just isn't as loud as it used to be. So if you're so inclined, I invite you to begin to explore a meditation practice. Perhaps that could have a positive impact on your mental state. Some other things is get less news. You know, news is negative. Why? It's not that the news itself is negative, but the news industry sells negative news. Why? Well, because it works and it gets people interested and they keep coming back. But I don't need to be, and I assert you don't need to be, filling your mind constantly with negative information and news. There's not much you can do about 99.9% of it anyway. You have your circle of concern, and then there's a smaller circle of influence. The news addresses more your circle of concern. I suggest you put your attention, energy, and resources in your circle of influence. You know, what's amazing today is what you can do in a car. I literally have gotten what would be the equivalent of master's degrees in a number of subjects over the years, just riding in my car, listening to podcasts, studying, listening to audio books, learning business, learning science, learning advertising, how to write. It's amazing what's at your fingertips today. And to be able to use your normally unproductive time, driving, working out, walking, as time where you're learning, improving, putting positive things into your mind, that has a lot to do with what your mental state is. I noticed that people who were successful at achieving their visions were diligent gatekeepers at what went in their mind and what they would allow in their mind. Something else I noticed was people who were successful at fulfilling on visions all had some type of exercise regime. Now, I'm not saying you have to become a workout expert, but wherever you are physically, you can begin to take it to another level. Why? Well, because when you exercise, you think clearer, you have more energy, and you have more stamina. In fact, any type of movement begins to immediately affect your mental state. And one thing I've noticed is it may not so much be the movement itself, but it's the breath. The breath is intimately connected with your mental state. Let me show you. Right now, whatever you're doing, put it down. Take 4 slow, deep, long breaths and start at the bottom of your lungs and fill it all the way up to the top. One, you inhale all the way to the bottom and then exhale slowly. 2, 3, and 4. Now, what is your mental state right now? Is it quieter, calmer, smoother than it was 60 seconds ago? Absolutely. You can change your mental state in an instant, in a minute. Take 100% responsibility for the mental state in which you operate. Why? Because the mental state defines what's possible for your vision. Your vision lives and breathes in the mental state. And we need to be 100% responsible as entrepreneurs and business owners for what our mental state is. Now, there's been a lot said. Take it for what it's worth. And nothing I said is the best way. It is just a way. And what really works is for you to begin to create your strategies for impacting and taking responsibility for your mental state. So here are the takeaways today. Yes, the mental state is probably the most important aspect of fulfilling on your vision. Yes, you created your mental state. And yes, you can change and be responsible for creating any mental state you think would support and be a match for your self-storage business and the vision you hold for it. For next week's episode, I'd like for you to not necessarily answer the question, but dwell in the question. And then after you've been there a while with the question, perhaps write it down, your answers or what you're present to. But dwell in the question, do I have any limiting beliefs or stories that I've told myself that impact my self-storage business? Do I have any limiting beliefs or stories I've told myself that impacts my self-storage business? Now, we did a True Wealth series in January where we go deep into how to identify the stories and how to alter the stories. If you feel so inclined, that might be a good series to watch this week. to help get you present to what the stories can be and how they can impact you and how you can change them. But most importantly, dwell in the questions. The quality of your life is determined by your mental state, and also it can be determined by the quality of the questions you ask yourself. Want to change your life? Change the questions you're asking yourself. And remember, there are 3 aspects to being successful at fulfilling on your vision: your mental state, your mental stories, and your strategies. Thank you for being here. My name's Mark Helm. I'm the author of Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage, and I'm the creator of the Storage World Analyzer. And before the ISS convention this early April, we're going to be rolling out version number 2, a much improved version. If you've been having some bugs and issues in version 1, just know those will be addressed and they'll be automatically updated for you. And we're very excited about the Storage World Analyzer, of a financial analysis program designed specifically for the self-storage industry. Even if you're not good with numbers, you will be good with this program. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you, hopefully, in April at the Inside Self Storage Convention. Thank you, and I'll see you later.